They say Seattle is a city made of rain and glass, a place where reflections matter. Maybe that's why I loved it so much. I was 16 then, full of big dreams and small insecurities. My name is Grace Marlowe, and I used to believe that life would look exactly the way I imagined it. Spotlights, theater curtains, clapping audiences. That was my dream. I wanted to become an actress. Not because I wanted fame, but because I loved the way stories could touch people's hearts. Every evening, I'd walk past the Pike Street Theater, stand by the glass doors, and watch rehearsals through the window. The lights shimmered against my reflection, and I'd whisper to myself, "One day, that stage will be mine." My parents weren't rich, just honest, hard-working people. Dad fixed boats down by the pier, and Mom ran a tiny cafe near our apartment. They didn't have much, but they gave me everything that mattered: love, warmth, and the courage to dream. Sometimes, when I stood by the kitchen window, the drizzle would tap gently on the glass. Mom would smile and say, "Grace, every drop is a promise. Don't let anything dull your light." Back then, I didn't know how much that sentence would one day mean to me. It began so quietly, I almost didn't notice. He first appeared one afternoon after my theater class, a man with tired eyes and a polite smile. He said his name was Martin, and that he often watched my class perform through the windows. He looked like he was in his late 20s, maybe 30. Too old for a 16-year-old like me, but I was too naive to understand the undertones in his voice. He complimented my voice, my eyes, the way I moved. At first, it felt flattering, until it didn't. He started waiting for me after classes. Then near the cafe. Then near our home. His gestures, flowers, letters, little notes left in my backpack, they stopped feeling sweet. They began to feel heavy, unsettling, wrong. I told him to stop. He laughed softly and said, "Grace, you don't mean that. You'll understand one day." I remember going home that evening and locking my door, heart pounding. I told my mom, and she said, "Don't worry, honey. Some men mistake obsession for love." She called the school. They spoke to him. He stayed away for a few days. But obsession never disappears quietly. It hides and waits. Months passed. Life returned to its rhythm, or so I thought. I'd been chosen for a small role in a community play. It wasn't much, but it meant the world to me. The day before the first rehearsal, I stopped by a convenience store on my way home. The air smelled like rain, and the neon lights flickered above the wet pavement. That's when I heard his voice again. "Grace." It was Martin. He was holding a small bouquet, lilies, my favorite. His smile was too calm, too certain. "I've missed you," he said softly. "You've grown even more beautiful." I took a step back. My throat tightened. "Martin, please stop following me." The smile disappeared. His jaw stiffened. "You think you're too good for me now? You'll regret this." I ran. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door to our apartment. I told Mom everything. We filed a police report the next morning. They told us they'd look into it. But obsession doesn't fear paperwork. It feeds on rejection. I didn't see him again for weeks, not until that night. It was late, past 9 p.m. The city was quiet under a steady drizzle. I was walking home from rehearsal, my umbrella flickering under the streetlights. The theater director had praised my voice that day, and I remember smiling, thinking maybe, just maybe, life was beginning to shine. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Behind me. I turned. Martin was there, drenched, shaking, his face twisted with something dark and broken. "You could have loved me," he said, voice trembling. "Why didn't you just say yes, Grace?" I froze. Before I could move, before I could scream. A splash. A searing pain tore through my face. The world burst into fire. My skin, it felt like it was melting off my bones. My throat caught a scream that never ended. The rain couldn't wash it away. I remember falling. I remember the scent, sharp, chemical, unbearable. Someone shouted. Then silence. The last thing I saw before the darkness was the city lights, blurred, distorted, fading into nothing. When I woke up, the world was white. White walls. White sheets. The air smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. At first, I thought it was still night, but it wasn't. The lights were simply too bright. I tried to touch my face, and felt bandages. So many bandages. Mom was there. Her eyes swollen from crying. She held my hand as if it were the only thread keeping her alive. I whispered, "What happened to me?" She didn't answer, just looked away and wept. Days turned into weeks. Pain became my new heartbeat. I couldn't eat, couldn't look at people, couldn't even recognize my own voice when I spoke. Then one morning, the nurse asked gently, "Grace, would you like to see your reflection today?" I nodded. They brought a small mirror. And for a moment, I wished I had died that night. The girl who once dreamed of lights, she was gone. My face, scarred, burned, unrecognizable. I screamed until my throat tore. Mom hugged me through the tears. "Grace," she whispered, "beauty was never just your skin. You're still my girl." But I didn't believe her. Not then. Not for a very long time. Healing isn't a sunrise. It's a slow unfurling, like light learning how to trust the sky again. After the attack, my days blurred into one long hallway of hospitals and surgeries. 30 procedures in 7 years. Each one promised progress. Each one left a new scar where the old one had finally begun to fade. But my mother never left my side. Every morning, she would read me lines from her worn-out prayer book and say, "Grace, this isn't the end of your story. This is only the editing phase." At first I hated those words. I didn't want a story. I wanted the life I'd lost, the face that had smiled back at me from mirrors, the girl who dreamed of stages. But pain has a strange rhythm. After enough repetitions, you start moving with it. Somewhere between surgeries and sleepless nights, I began to write. Little pieces at first, letters to the girl I used to be, notes to other survivors I read about online. I started sharing them anonymously on a local support forum. People wrote back. Women from everywhere. New York, Kansas, London. Each story was a mirror I could finally look into without flinching. That's when I realized. Maybe my purpose wasn't to be seen on a stage. Maybe it was to make others feel seen. By 2016, I had recovered enough to step outside without the heavy scarf. The wind on my skin felt unfamiliar, both tender and terrifying. I applied for a permit to start a small non-profit. Phoenix Voices, a safe space for survivors of burns and acid violence. Mom sold her cafe to help fund it. Dad rebuilt an old warehouse into our community center. The first time I spoke publicly, my hands trembled. I stood before a small crowd at the University of Washington. When the lights hit my face, I felt the old fear rising. Then, from the front row, someone whispered, "You're beautiful, Grace." I looked down. It was a young girl wearing a headscarf, her own scars peeking from beneath the fabric. In that moment, the fear dissolved. I spoke for 20 minutes, not perfectly, not gracefully, but truthfully. I told them that strength is not the absence of scars. It's learning to live because of them. After the talk, a man approached me. He carried a notebook and an easy smile that didn't pity, it respected. "Evan Miller," he said, offering his hand. "I write for the Seattle Beacon. I'd like to feature your story." I hesitated. Reporters had reached out before, often chasing tragedy, not truth. But something about Evan felt different. He asked, then listened. He didn't fill the silence. He honored it. We spent weeks talking for the article. About laws that needed changing, about how acid could still be bought too easily in hardware stores. He promised to help me push for regulation. He kept that promise. Together, we met city officials, lawmakers, and journalists. When new legislation finally required identification and purchase records for corrosive substances, I cried, not for victory, but for validation. For the first time in years, I felt useful. I never thought love would visit me again. I'd buried that dream long ago, beneath gauze and fear. But love rarely arrives announced. Sometimes it comes softly, disguised as friendship. Evan and I started spending more time together after the law passed. Coffee turned into long walks by the pier. We'd watch ferries drift across the Sound while the city lights blinked like patient stars. He never asked about my scars unless I brought them up. When I did, he listened the same way he always had, completely present. One evening, as we closed the office after a fundraising event, he said. Grace, you make courage look effortless. I laughed. It's not. Some days I just pretend. He smiled. Then keep pretending. The world needs your kind of pretending. That night, I realized something I hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope. Months later, during a quiet dinner, Evan slid a small silver ring across the table. No grand speeches, no audience, just two people who had learned the language of silence. He said, I don't want to fix your story, Grace. I want to be part of it. I cried. And for the first time, those tears didn't sting. They healed. Our wedding was private, just family, a few close friends, and the ocean whispering in the distance. Evan insisted on keeping it small. He worried about the noise, the online cruelty that often finds its way into public joy. I agreed. Love didn't need witnesses. It only needed truth. 2 years later, I found out I was pregnant. I should have been overjoyed, and I was, but beneath that joy hid a quiet terror. What if my child was afraid of me? What if the first thing she saw was not her mother's love, but her mother's scars? The night before my due date, I stood by the mirror, tracing the uneven edges of my reflection. I whispered, You'll have to teach her what beauty means. When the contractions came, Evan held my hand all through the night. I remember the hum of machines, the scent of antiseptic. It brought back hospital memories I tried to bury. And then, a cry. A sound so pure it silenced the world. The nurse placed a tiny bundle in my arms. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked down at her, soft pink skin, eyes still adjusting to light. She blinked up at me. And she smiled. That small, instinctive curve of her lips shattered every wall I'd built around my heart. In that smile lived forgiveness, acceptance, and everything I thought I'd lost. I named her Hope. Hope is 4 now. She loves painting clouds and sneaking marshmallows from the kitchen. Sometimes she touches the lines on my face and asks, Mama, did the sun draw these? And I always tell her yes, because in a way, it did. People still stare sometimes. I still catch whispers, double takes, uncomfortable silences. But I've learned not to hide. Each scar is a sentence in a story only I can tell. When I speak at events now, I start with this. They tried to destroy my face. Instead, they revealed my soul. The audience always grows quiet. Some cry. Some smile. Most simply listen. I tell them that love at first sight is real, but not the way we think. It isn't about how someone looks, it's about how someone feels when they see you. Evan saw me long before he looked at me. And my daughter, she loved me before she could even speak. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been hurt too. Maybe you've been told that you're too broken to be loved. But listen carefully, your scars are proof that you fought, not that you failed. The mirror no longer frightens me. Now, it reflects every sunrise I survived. And every time hope laughs, I hear the world apologizing for ever doubting me. So if there's one thing my life has taught me, it's this. True beauty isn't what the light reveals. It's what the fire could never burn away.